The birth of a tradition. What if I told you that Christmas, as you know it today, was almost banned forever in America? That there was a time when celebrating December 25th could land you in jail? Get ready, because the story I'm about to tell you will completely change the way you see every decoration, every light, and every tradition that your family cherishes so much. Come with me now. Let your imagination soar, because we're going back in time together. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine 17th century America. The streets are dirt roads, the houses are rustic wood, and the icy December wind blows strongly across the New England colonies. You'd expect to see decorated trees, colorful presents, and families gathered singing Christmas carols, wouldn't you? Well, prepare yourself for a surprise that will shake everything you thought you knew about the origins of American Christmas. The Puritans, those same pilgrims who arrived on the Mayflower seeking religious freedom, had a very particular view of Christmas. For them, the celebration of December 25th was nothing more than a pagan festival disguised as a Christian holiday. They looked at European traditions with suspicion and revulsion. The drinking parties, the cheerful songs, the lavish banquets, all of this was considered sinful in the eyes of these austere and devout colonists. In 1659, something extraordinary happened in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Puritan leaders made a decision that seems absolutely unbelievable to us today. They officially banned Christmas. That's right, you heard correctly. Anyone caught celebrating the holiday would be fined 5 shillings, a considerable sum for the time. Just imagine, you could be punished for simply wishing your neighbor a Merry Christmas or for preparing a special Christmas dinner for your family. If this story is surprising you as much as it surprised me when I first discovered it, click the like button right now, because it really helps the channel and motivates me to bring you more incredible stories like this one. But returning to our journey through time, the prohibition of Christmas was not merely a religious matter. There was also a practical and social component to this decision. The Puritans observed that in England, the Christmas period had become an excuse for excesses of all kinds. People drank too much, ate too much, and behavior in the streets bordered on anarchy. The American colonists wanted to build a new, pure society, free from these old-world vices. William Bradford, the governor of the Plymouth colony, left fascinating records about this time. In his diary, he describes how, on the first Christmas of the Pilgrims on American soil in 1621, he ordered everyone to work as usual. Some younger colonists protested, saying it was against their conscience to work on a holy day. Bradford, with his characteristic pragmatic wisdom, replied that if they truly considered the day sacred, then they should spend it at home, in silent prayer, not in the streets partying. The tension between those who wanted to celebrate and those who condemned the celebration created an interesting division in colonial society. In the southern colonies, such as Virginia and Maryland, the situation was completely different. There, Anglican colonists brought with them the festive traditions of England without Puritan guilt. Christmas was celebrated with elaborate banquets, dances, games, and much joy. It was as if two Americas existed side by side, separated not only by geography, but by completely opposing views on how to live out their faith. In Jamestown, Virginia, the first recorded Christmas celebration on American soil took place in 1607. Captain John Smith described in his memoirs how the colonists, even amidst the extreme hardships of that first year, found the strength to celebrate. There was no luxury, no abundance, but there was a genuine attempt to keep alive the festive spirit they knew from their homeland. And here's a curious fact that few people know. The tradition of setting off fireworks and making noise on Christmas Eve didn't begin as a joyful celebration. In fact, many colonists believed that loud noises would ward off evil spirits who, according to the beliefs of the time, roamed more freely during the longer winter nights. What we see today as simple fun had its roots in medieval superstitions brought from Europe. If you're following this journey with me and want to discover how these very different traditions eventually merged to create the American Christmas we know today, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. That way you won't miss the next chapter of this incredible story, which still has many more surprises in store. Colonial Christmas food was also very different from what we imagine. Forget the golden, perfect turkey that illustrates today's magazines. In the first decades of colonial America, the main Christmas dish could be anything that was available: venison, wild duck, goose, or even bear meat in some more remote regions. The famous mince pie, which the English loved, was adapted with local ingredients, creating unique versions that existed only in the New World. Wassail, a hot drink made with cider, spices, and sugar, was one of the few traditions that managed to cross the Atlantic virtually intact. In the richer homes of the southern colonies, the ritual of preparing and sharing wassail was a central moment of the celebration. The drink was served in large wooden or ceramic bowls, and each family member took a sip, passing the bowl on while making wishes for health and prosperity for the coming year. But it wasn't all parties and celebrations. For enslaved Africans working on plantations in the South, the Christmas season had an ambiguous meaning. On one hand, it was one of the few times of the year when they received a few days of rest from brutal labor. On the other hand, they were often forced to participate in their masters' celebrations, serving at feasts and preparing banquets they could not enjoy themselves. Still, in their own communities, they created their own celebrations, blending African traditions with elements of the Christianity imposed upon them, planting the seeds of a rich cultural heritage that would profoundly influence American Christmas in the following centuries. As the 17th century drew to a close and the 18th began, the rigid Puritan prohibitions began to weaken. Massachusetts' law against Christmas was officially repealed in 1681, although social prejudice against the celebration persisted for many more decades. It was the beginning of a slow but inevitable transformation that would shape the destiny of the holiday in the young American nation.
Christmas in the Age of Revolution and the Birth of a Nation. Now that you've discovered how Christmas was almost erased from American history by the Puritans, prepare to delve into an even more turbulent and fascinating period. Let's journey together through the decades that shaped not only a nation, but also the soul of the world's most beloved holiday. Hold on tight, because the story I'm about to tell involves war, espionage, and one of the most pivotal Christmas nights in world history. We are now at the end of the 18th century, and colonial America is seething with tension. Tea has been thrown into Boston Harbor, revolutionary pamphlets circulate from hand to hand, and the dream of independence burns in the hearts of thousands of colonists. But what happened to Christmas amidst all this political turmoil? The answer will surprise you in ways you never imagined. George Washington, the man who would become the father of the American nation, had a peculiar relationship with Christmas. Born into an Anglican family in Virginia, he grew up celebrating the holiday in a traditional way. Records from Mount Vernon, his beloved estate, reveal that Washington enjoyed Christmas festivities with genuine enthusiasm. There was music, dancing, card games, and tables laden with food and drink. But it was on one particular Christmas Eve that Washington would enter history in a way that no one could have predicted. It was December 25, 1776. The Continental Army was in shambles. Successive defeats had decimated troop morale, and many soldiers were simply abandoning their positions to return home. Washington knew he needed a victory, any victory, to keep the flame of revolution alive. And it was then that he made one of the most audacious decisions in military history. While the Hessian mercenaries hired by the British celebrated Christmas in Trenton, New Jersey, with all the abundance and drinking that the occasion demanded, Washington gathered his exhausted and hungry men on the banks of the Delaware River. The plan was simple in theory, but almost impossible in practice. Cross the icy river in the middle of the night and attack the Hessians by surprise at dawn on the 26th. If this story is making your heart beat faster, imagine what it was like for those soldiers on that cold night. Leave a like now to show me you're with me on this journey, because there's still much more to come. The crossing of the Delaware was a nightmare. Chunks of ice floated on the dark river, threatening to capsize the small boats at any moment. The temperature was brutal, and many soldiers didn't even have proper shoes, leaving trails of blood in the snow as they marched. But Washington, standing at the bow of his boat, kept his gaze fixed on the opposite bank. He knew that this Christmas night would determine the fate of a nation yet to be born. The attack was a resounding success. The Hessians, still reeling from the previous night's celebrations, were caught completely off guard. The victory at Trenton was not merely military, it was psychological. It proved that the Continental Army could win, that the dream of freedom was not dead. And all this happened because Washington chose Christmas Eve for its audacious coup, knowing that its enemies would be distracted by the festivities. This battle created a powerful association in the American mind between Christmas and the spirit of patriotic sacrifice. The soldiers who marched that cold night gave up their own celebrations, time with their families, to fight for something greater. This narrative would be repeated and celebrated for generations, transforming Christmas into something more than a religious holiday. It also became a symbol of the American spirit of perseverance and courage. But while the War of Independence transformed the meaning of Christmas for some, daily life in the colonies continued, and traditions kept evolving in fascinating ways. In large cities like Philadelphia and New York, a new tradition began to gain momentum: Christmas markets. Inspired by the famous Christmas markets of Germany, these markets brought together artisans, merchants, and families in a festive atmosphere where one could buy gifts, decorations, and treats. German immigrants, in fact, played a fundamental role in the evolution of American Christmas during this period. They brought with them a tradition that today seems absolutely essential to us, but which at the time was practically unknown in the English origin colonies: the Christmas tree. The Germans of Pennsylvania, known as Pennsylvania Dutch, decorated small pine trees with candles, dried fruits, nuts, and small handmade ornaments. Their neighbors of other origins viewed this practice with a mixture of curiosity and bewilderment. It's incredible to think that something so central to the modern Christmas was seen as a foreign eccentricity just a few centuries ago, isn't it? If you're finding these discoveries as fascinating as I am, share this video with someone who also loves history. Together, we can spread this knowledge to more people. The tradition of Christmas gifts also underwent significant transformations during the Revolutionary and post-Revolutionary era. In the decades before independence, exchanging gifts was a relatively modest practice, generally limited to small handmade trinkets or homemade treats. But as the American economy began to develop, gifts became more elaborate and commercial. The almanacs of the time, annual publications that were extremely popular, began to include suggestions for Christmas gifts. Simple jewelry, books, musical instruments, and fine cloths appeared on the lists for the more affluent. For humbler families, hand-knitted woolen socks, homemade sweets, and small wooden toys were the most common gifts. The idea that the value of the gift should reflect the affection for the recipient was already firmly established in American culture. A curious tradition that flourished during this period was that of the Christmas mummers, or Belsnickels, in German communities. Men dressed in tattered clothes, frightening masks, and animal skins went from house to house on Christmas Eve. They made noise, scared the children, and demanded food and drink in exchange for blessings for the new year. If the children had behaved well during the year, they received small gifts. If not, they received symbolic beatings with tree branches. This figure of Belsnickel was very different from the kindly Santa Claus that we know today. He was an ambiguous creature, half frightening, half generous, embodying both reward and punishment. In some communities, Belsnickel arrived before Christmas itself, serving as a final warning for children to behave in the last days before the holiday. The tradition persisted in some rural areas of Pennsylvania until the early 20th century, when it was gradually replaced by the friendlier image of Santa Claus. Enslaved people on southern plantations developed their own unique Christmas traditions during this period. The Jonkonnu, or Jonkonnu, was a celebration that blended African, Caribbean, and European elements. Groups of enslaved men dressed in elaborate costumes, often made of strips of colorful fabric and impressive masks, and danced through the streets and from farm to farm. The music was played with improvised instruments, and the dancing was energetic and expressive. Slave owners tolerated and even encouraged Jonkonnu, seeing it as a way to keep the enslaved people pacified. But for the enslaved themselves, the celebration had much deeper meanings. It was a moment of cultural affirmation, of connection with African roots, and of community building amidst the brutality of slavery. Many of the rhythms and movements of Jonkonnu would survive and influence African American music and dance for centuries. The Christmas season was also one of the only times when enslaved families separated by sales could hope to reunite. Some masters allowed visits during Christmas week, and these reunions, however brief, were moments of intense joy and poignant sorrow. The songs that emerged from these experiences still carry a unique blend of celebration and melancholy that is characteristic of the African American contribution to Christmas music. As the 18th century drew to a close and the 19th began, the young American Republic still lacked a truly national Christmas. Regional differences persisted. The North still carried vestiges of Puritan austerity, while the South maintained more exuberant festive traditions. Immigrants from different countries brought their own practices, creating a fascinating but fragmented cultural mosaic. Something or someone was still missing to unify all these traditions into a truly American celebration. This unification would come from unexpected sources: writers, poets, and artists, who in the first decades of the 19th century invented the modern American Christmas practically from scratch. But this extraordinary story of cultural creation is a topic for our next chapter.
The invention of the American Christmas and the birth of Santa Claus. Now we arrive at the most extraordinary chapter of our journey. Everything you've discovered so far has only been preparation for what I'm about to reveal. Because the Christmas you celebrate today, with its decorated trees, wrapped presents, and Santa Claus with a white beard and red suit, didn't evolve naturally over the centuries. It was deliberately invented, created by a small group of New York writers, poets, and artists who decided to fabricate a tradition from scratch. And the story of how they did it is so surprising it seems like fiction. We are now at the beginning of the 19th century, and New York is a city in turmoil. Immigration grows every year, class differences become more pronounced, and the streets during the Christmas season are the stage for a tradition that today would seem absolutely shocking to us. Christmas was not a peaceful family celebration. It was a period of chaos, drunkenness, and social inversion, where the poor invaded the homes of the rich, demanding food and drink, and gangs of young people roamed the streets, causing destruction. This tradition of misrule, or Christmas disorder, had medieval European roots, but in early 19th century America, it had become a real social problem. Newspapers of the time are full of reports of Christmas riots, destroyed property, and violent confrontations. The New York elite viewed this scenario with growing concern. Something needed to be done to tame Christmas, to transform it from an uncontrolled street party into a family celebration contained within the walls of the home. And that's exactly what a group of New York intellectuals decided to do. They called themselves the Knickerbockers, a reference to the pseudonym used by Washington Irving, and included some of the most influential writers of the time. Their plan was audacious, to completely reinvent the American Christmas through literature. And it worked, beyond all expectations. If you're starting to realize that practically everything we associate with Christmas was invented on purpose, you're absolutely right. Stick with me until the end of this chapter, because the revelations that are yet to come will blow your mind. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is the perfect time. Click the subscribe button and activate the bell so you don't miss any content like this. Washington Irving took the first crucial step in 1809 when he published his historical satire, A History of New York. In this book, Irving did something brilliant. He invented Dutch traditions that never existed. He described St. Nicholas as the patron saint of New York, arriving on a flying horse to bring gifts to children. Irving claimed that Dutch colonists celebrated Christmas with warm family gatherings around the hearth. The problem is that none of this was true. Irving was creating a fictional past to justify the future he wanted to build. Irving's genius lay in realizing that people needed to believe they were reviving old traditions, not creating new ones. Nobody wants to admit they're inventing a tradition from scratch. But if you say you're reviving the good customs of your ancestors, people embrace the idea enthusiastically. And that's exactly what happened. But the masterstroke came in 1823 when an anonymous poem was published in the Sentinel newspaper of Troy, New York. The title was A Visit from St. Nicholas, but the world would come to know it as The Night Before Christmas. This single poem, of only a few dozen verses, did more to define American Christmas than any other document in history. Its author is generally credited to Clement Clarke Moore, although this authorship is disputed to this day. Let me read a few excerpts to you, because I want you to realize how every detail of our modern Christmas was established in these lines written exactly 200 years ago. The poem begins on Christmas Eve, with the whole family gathered at home, the children asleep in their beds. Stockings are carefully hung on the fireplace in hope that St. Nicholas will soon arrive. Every element of this scene, which seems so natural to us today, was being codified for the first time. And then the poem describes the arrival of St. Nicholas. He comes in a miniature sleigh pulled by 8 little reindeer, each with its own name: Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donner, and Blitzen. Before this poem, St. Nicholas didn't have reindeer. He didn't have a sleigh. He didn't come down the chimney. Clement Clarke Moore invented all of that, and the world simply accepted it as if it had always been that way. The physical description of St. Nicholas in the poem is also fundamental. He's described as a cheerful, chubby, and plump old elf with cheeks as rosy as cherries, a nose like a cherry, and a beard as white as snow. His eyes sparkle, his dimples are cheerful, and when he laughs, his belly jiggles like a bowl full of jelly. This image replaced all previous versions of St. Nicholas, which ranged from a thin and stern bishop to a frightening figure like Belsnickel. This is absolutely incredible when you stop and think about it. A single poem published in a local newspaper completely transformed the image of a figure that had existed for centuries. If you're as impressed as I am by the power of storytelling to shape reality, leave a comment below telling me about it. I read all the comments and love to know what you're thinking. But the transformation of American Christmas didn't stop there. The next crucial figure in this story is Charles Dickens, the English writer who, although not American, had a monumental influence on Christmas in the United States. When A Christmas Carol was published in 1843, the book crossed the Atlantic like lightning and captured the American imagination. The story of Ebenezer Scrooge, the old miser transformed by the spirit of Christmas, established a powerful moral narrative that resonates to this day. Dickens associated Christmas with charity, generosity, and personal redemption. He transformed the holiday into an annual opportunity for moral renewal, for reconnection with humanity's deepest values. And Americans, especially the rising middle class, embraced this message fervently. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert also contributed to the transformation of the American Christmas, albeit indirectly. In 1848, an illustration of the British royal couple around a decorated Christmas tree was published in the Illustrated London News and quickly reproduced in American publications. Suddenly, the Christmas tree, which until then had been seen as a German eccentricity, became the ultimate symbol of a respectable and elegant Christmas. The American Civil War, which devastated the country between 1861 and 1865, paradoxically helped solidify Christmas as a unified national holiday. During the war, illustrator Thomas Nast, working for Harper's Weekly, created a series of images of Santa Claus that would become iconic. Nast drew Santa Claus visiting Union soldiers, distributing gifts, and bringing joy amidst the horrors of war. These images were powerful propaganda, associating Santa Claus with the North and the Union cause. It was Nast who visually established many of the elements we associate with Santa Claus today. He dressed him in red, gave him a workshop at the North Pole, showed him making lists of good and bad children, and surrounded him with hard-working elves. Over decades of illustrations, Nast essentially completed the visual creation that Moore's poem had begun. After the Civil War, Christmas finally became a federal holiday in 1870, when President Ulysses S. Grant signed the law officially establishing the date. It was a gesture of national reconciliation, an attempt to unite North and South around a common celebration. Christmas, which had been so divisive in the early decades of the Republic, now became a symbol of American unity. The final decades of the 19th century saw the accelerated commercialization of Christmas. Department stores, an innovation of the time, embraced the holiday as a golden opportunity to boost sales. Macy's in New York began creating elaborate Christmas window displays that attracted crowds. The tradition of Santa Claus in stores, where children could sit on Santa's lap and make their wishes, was born during this period. Christmas cards, another tradition that seems timeless but was invented in the 19th century, also became popular around this time. Louis Prong, a German immigrant in Boston, began mass-producing colorful Christmas cards in the 1870s. His elaborate creations, often featuring flowers, children, and winter scenes, established the Christmas card aesthetic that would persist for over a century. And American Christmas music also flourished during this period. Songs like Jingle Bells, written in 1857 by James Lord Pierpont, were not originally even a Christmas song, but a song about sleigh races. Over time, however, it was absorbed into the Christmas repertoire and became one of the most recognizable holiday songs. O Holy Night was translated from French